Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. So good to have you all here for this next episode of Time to Reset. We are going to reset around employee engagement, quality leadership, and really creating buy-in. And this isn't new. There are lots of reports. Gallup for years and years has been talking about how engagement is at an all-time low, and every year it just gets lower. So why are we not getting this? Google did a study years ago, Project Aristotle, and they talked about psychological safety, and that seems also to really not to have flourished. So today, we're going to talk about what are the challenges and how do we address that. And we have a wonderful guest with us today, an expert in this space. And his new book is coming out exactly on this topic. His name is Dave Garrison, and he is soon to launch The Buy-in Advantage, Why Employees Stop Caring and How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Give Their All. So I'm excited to unpack this with you, Dave, and see why we've been getting it wrong and how do we get it right.
Thank you, Penny. Excited to be here and excited to learn from your questions and your experiences as well.
Well, let's dive in. What prompted you to write this book? What was the impetus here?
Yeah, after a couple of decades as CEO of multinational companies, I realized the greatest satisfaction for me was when people and teams accomplished things they didn't know were possible, when they achieved their full potential. And then the more I talked to leaders, I heard about these frustrations of, I am working so hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one paying attention. I'm the only one working this hard. Or I climb up the mountain and I charge and I look down the hill and there's nobody close behind me, which is a feeling of frustration. And then I look at the data from Gallup, as you say, for 30 years, whatever we're doing as leaders is apparently not working if success is the measurement of people really caring about the place that they work. And that's such a waste of human potential. So it got me really curious to learn from other leaders and my own experience what engagement looks like and how great leaders get people to give it their all.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to dive in because clearly we haven't been getting it right for a very long time. Why is that? Hello, why are we not getting it?
I do not fault leaders at all. Having been a leader, there's a long list of to-do on your computer, on your phone, on your stickies. And one of the things is generally not generate engagement. I've never had an employee bang on the door or an investor say, "What are you doing about engagement today?" It doesn't come up. It's generally not a measure, and it is something that takes longer than the to-do list item. It takes longer than a minute to make it happen, but the payoff is a very long-term payoff. So I don't fault leaders, but the situation has gotten worse due to some changes that have occurred in the last couple of years. For example.
Well, wait, before we go there, so I just want to reinforce. So to me, it's that we just aren't necessarily setting our priorities accurately as leaders, just to make it really simple, right? Is that it has to be a priority if we want people to care. And when people care, that's when we create better results in our organizations. Our customers are happy. So there's just too many things going on. It's not setting those clear priorities. Is that fair enough?
Absolutely. That's fair enough. It's also, in defense of leaders, most of us learn leadership from the people that we have been led by. And because leaders have not practiced this for 30 years, it's not like we're going to say, oh, I know what they're missing. They're missing the engagement quotient. So let me start doing that. We tend to do what we have seen done and what we believe the role of a leader is. And we have the opportunity to say, do you know what? If we just do some things differently, if we tweak it and prioritize engagement, our lives would be infinitely easier. We'd have
Yeah,
less
and
to-do list.
absolutely. And I'm not looking to blame either. I've made my own mistakes as a leader. Part of the challenge is also, there are all these competing priorities or what seem to be competing priorities. And when we get stressed, our focus narrows, right? And so we've lost sight of the big picture. So what's the first step that you suggest? Or I think you were going in a direction and I stopped you. Where were you headed?
Well, I was going to talk about how things have changed in the last 5
Let's do
years.
that.
So let's do that. And then I want to go to your question about, so what's the first step? Because it's also a great question. But here's what's changed. As a result of the time and resources we had with COVID, employees redefine what they want people, redefine what they expected from work. They redefine what they're looking for in terms of purpose from work, which puts additional burden on the workplace. There is a new generation, as there always is. This generation values purpose and impact as much as they do money. Purpose and impact, and
Or
organizations are not set up for that, and our leaders haven't been trained in how to provide environments of purpose and impact. And so these things combine, this generational change and the break from COVID combines to create like a perfect storm. And this is the time for leaders to consider the first step. First step is to recognize what we believe to be very true, which is all of us are smarter than any of us. And that if we slow down as leaders, we'll actually speed up, which I know is something you've written about recently. So slowing down to speed up seems counterintuitive. But the more that we can get people's best thinking, the more we can engage people in how we make decisions and how we set priorities, the more we can spend time communicating why the priorities matter in a way that's relevant, and then to ask for people's participation in a humble fashion, we can generate engagement. Now, here's the deal. I'll hear, I don't have time for all that. I'm too busy, and I ask them what they're too busy doing. And
right,
many times it's, well, recruiting, because we have great talents leaving.
right.
It's like, okay, well, that's
We
kind
focus on
of
the symptom and not the root cause.
right. And so turnover is the result, most of the time, turnover is the result of I'm not getting what I need here. And leaders have been led to think, oh, it's about money. And money is certainly important, and people always love more money, but people will leave for less money if they
Hmm.
believe their needs for alignment of purpose and impact will be met, or flexibility will be met. They'll go.
Right.
According to Gallup, it takes over 25% pay raise for somebody to leave if they're engaged.
Yeah. Well, and there's all those excuses, right? I don't have the time. They're not the right people. They're lazy. You hear all different kinds of things, but the real truth is we have to look in the mirror at the leadership that we're providing and look at like you said, how the marketplace has changed. It's not anymore like in my generation, my parents' generation, they would tolerate a whole lot. Loyalty was, and a little bit of fear, right? Of that uncertainty of not having a job. Today, people are like, I don't care. I'll quit. I don't need to have a job right away. I'll figure it out. And so that mentality, right, keeps those people today focused on what matters at work, and they're not willing to tolerate being treated unfairly or being, let's say, overworked, or different things that we may have tolerated in the past is just something that they're not willing to tolerate anymore.
And we'll call that being treated as a human doing. I'm not a doing. I'm not a machine. I'm not a
Right.
cog. I'm a human being. And so one of the things we talk about in the book, The Buying Advantage, is human beings, not human doings. And human beings mean leaders have an opportunity before they ask for something to be done to recognize people as people and to connect. And it can be as simple as saying, how are you? And when somebody says fine, don't accept the answer fine. Say, no, I really want to know. How are you doing? We talk in the book about a restaurant in Las Vegas that uses a whiteboard where employees, these are minimum wage employees, write on the whiteboard how they are doing on a numeric scale before they come in. So the supervisor can spot people who may not be feeling great or have issues at home.
Right.
Acknowledging that and talking to them as a human being and say, what can I do to support you, if anything? makes people recognize they are appreciated and seen, because that psychological safety, you talked about Project Aristotle. Google set out to answer the question, what makes their most effective teams? Because they're investing billions in teams. And it's not the smartest people. It's not
Right.
the hardest working people. It's not the
Nope.
people with the biggest degrees. It's, as you said, the people who enjoy an environment of psychological safety, which requires people being seen as human beings, and then leaders demonstrating this is a safe space. I am interested in all ideas, and we will do this together. That just shifts the whole dynamics.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention a couple things. So you said, let's say that example that you gave where people gave a number as to where they are. First, you have to have an environment of psychological safety for somebody to say, I'm at a 3. Like,
Right.
I'm not doing well today. And so I want to come back to that as to how one does that,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that may be part of the problem is that they're not clear that they have it or don't have it, or, we can assume that, oh, well, of course everybody is safe. I'm okay to take that information, but that doesn't mean other people feel that. But before we go there, I also want to point out for people who are listening, that's a fantastic coaching tool, using a scale to just ask people in anything, how would you rate this meeting from a scale of 1 to 10? So that you could, or anything, right? That you can take something that might be a little bit more subjective. Because when my son had anxiety and I didn't understand the anxiety, I would ask him on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the absolute worst and 1 not at all, where are you today? So that I could understand how to better support him and where he was emotionally. And that was a super huge help. And I think just even answering that helped him feel seen and heard. And also, I didn't assume that I understood, right? He was defining that. So I think that in itself is a mechanism. If, maybe you'd like to say something in addition to that, but I just wanted to point that out because I use it as a coach and as a leader all the time. And I think it's
Absolutely. It's scaling.
powerful.
And only I can scale myself. You cannot scale me. You might be able to look and say, well, I'll scale your output, but you can't scale how I'm showing up as a human being. So it's a great example. And as we apply that same idea, and the idea is simply this: I can only see what I can see. You can only see what you can see, but we see different things because it's the result of our experience. And so when we can combine notes, we can create powerful outcomes. That's all of us are smarter than any of us. Here's how it applies to meetings. In addition to scaling at the end of every meeting, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was this time? How was this use of time for you? Or however you want to ask the question.
Right?
So ask the question, what worked and what didn't work in today's meeting? What worked for you and what didn't work? Because if leaders can take on that feedback, they will then be able to continually improve the meeting for everybody's experience. Because I know it might be the leaders' meeting, but if we don't understand how people experience, we're going to waste time. We're going to go through wasted time cycles, and you'll see people texting and nodding off, and they'll be on their email or looking around. And why bother having the meeting if they're not there? So 2 questions is rating. Another is what worked and didn't work. And the third technique for meetings, also in the book on effective meetings, is asking at the beginning of a meeting, what are your expectations? What would make this a good use of your time? Because you have no idea what's on people's mind when they walk in. You have no idea.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. That seems late to ask that question.
Yeah.
So, and I apologize, like I do this sometimes because I'm putting on my hat of the person. Like if I go around the room and ask everybody for their expectations of the meeting, then we might take up the whole meeting talking about people's expectations. I think there's a reason that there's an agenda, and
Right.
that is this is the purpose of the meeting. And maybe people would give you feedback before the meeting if they had other expectations. I would sooner see that as a leader before the meeting, before everybody comes in. What's your thought on that?
Absolutely delighted to have you gather expectations before the meeting. No problem there. Expectations are about checking in where they are at that moment. So, for example, I met with a leadership team of a company where they had had an event that had everybody distracted. So, no matter what was on the agenda, it didn't matter. They were focused on something else.
Right.
I wouldn't have known that. And so then the question is, as a leader, if I'm leading the meeting, the question is, okay, do we need to divert to this issue temporarily? And that's a rare case. More often, it's you're going to hear expectations about, I want to make sure we get to a solution on XYZ. And so you need to know those expectations, not because you're going to change everything about the meeting, but because you're going to identify what's on people's minds so you can honor it and just say, hey, do you know what, Penny? That's not something we're likely to get to today. Can we do a one-on-one? Can we add it to next week's agenda? It's making it our meeting and allowing people to participate right out of the bat, as opposed to, okay, let's get to the agenda. First item on the agenda today is updates. We're going to kill you with boredom by updates. Operations, what's going on with you? Oh, blah, 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 and everybody falls asleep. So I
Right.
think expectations are important. Also, you'd mentioned agenda. Agenda, we recommend 100% of the time if it's more than two people. And we would say that agenda plus the material supporting the agenda needs to go out at
Absolutely.
least 24 hours in advance because half of us process information overnight. So if you're trying to make a decision and you don't do that, you've lost half the people in the meeting. And you'd have to have the same meeting tomorrow and come back and say, hey, for the rest of you, what were you guys thinking?
Right. And especially if you need creative input, right? People need time to marinate, to think about it, and to bring their ideas. So, absolutely important. So, let's come back to so that's meeting buy in. I get what you're saying about that, right? As everybody is bought into what's most important to talk about today. And that makes sense. If they're distracted or their mind is elsewhere, at least you can address that and bring everybody into a present state. So, that makes 100% sense. So, let's come back to sort of in general, away from the meetings themselves and into how does a leader begin to create psychological safety? Let's say it's an organization that they've come newly into and there are people are leaving, right? There's turnover issues, there's issues, right? With engagement. So what is the first thing that that leader looks for or could do to set the tone for some psychological safety?
First of all, do nothing, meaning don't start taking action based on what the recruiter has told you, what the existing boss person has told you, or some story you read in the newspaper. The first thing to do is to do interviews with people and say, look, I'm new here. I'm really curious to know what are things that we do really well that we want to make sure we don't lose track of? And two, what is it we need to do differently? What's your take on what's going on here? And basically do interviews with people so that you can assemble a collective story about what's going on that will help you prioritize and help you know what questions to ask. But if you come in with your experience from the past company and say, okay, I'm here to figure it out. Now, here's what we're going to do. You've already lost people. You've disengaged people. People will say, okay,
There's
Penny,
another leader that doesn't care and isn't going to listen. And yeah,
so
absolutely.
demonstrate listening, demonstrate active listening, honor people as human beings, be humble. Go ask them because in 30 days, if it's really screwed up, unless the building is burning down and you have proof that the building is burning down, take the time to engage people to learn what they know and what advice they have for you in a humble fashion so that you can say, thank you for that feedback. I'm going to share with the entire team what I've learned on this listening tour. And then together, we're going to prioritize and address the issues.
Absolutely. And even if the house is burning down, there are ways to gather people together in groups and do the same thing and create, create an environment where they can feel heard. It's usually just getting that first person going, right? That once somebody starts to share and open up and the response is tell me more or let's keep track of this or whatever it is that accepts and is open to it, right? Then you can actually fairly quickly get a real picture of what's happening.
Yeah, and tell me more is a power phrase there, as opposed to, I don't think that'll work. Why do you think that would work? Questions like, tell me more, or questions like, that's interesting. What else did you consider? That's
Hmm.
interesting. Can you tell me what you considered when you came up with that solution? I'd like to learn is a rich dialogue that lets people know you're really curious. And what's interesting, as leaders, we sometimes bring along what we learn in grade school that there's a right answer. And the teacher
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to have the right answer, and our job is to please the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
That's just so wrong at so many levels. My experience, there's not a right answer. There are lots of answers. The question is, which answer is the best fit for our criteria? And leaders are not able to grow people to take on more unless they understand how it is their thought process is. So, by asking questions like, what else did you consider? Can you tell me what criteria you considered to get there? What's the checklist in your head? Then we can learn specifically how to work with that person to increase their capacity to make great decisions, which is different than, well, that happened to me before, and here's what I did, which is well intentioned, but doesn't help the person because they're not in that situation. They will never be in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just had a question in my head and I lost it, but that's all good.
Okay.
So we talked about some things that, you could say in those situations to help to open up. Is there anything I didn't ask you yet that you feel like is important in this context?
Drama free problem solving, drama free problem solving. So I can't tell you how many teams I've observed who go into debate about what the solution is to a problem. And generally, it's the people with the biggest title, the biggest egos, or the most endurance. And it's like watching a ping pong match. But this person says, no, my idea better. No, my idea is better. No, my idea is better. This shame and the waste of time is one. It's two people out of six who are doing the talking, and the rest are observers. The second shame is there's no alignment on what it is we're really talking about, except
Mhm.
for their egos. So the drama free problem solving system simply says, look, the leader can identify a desired outcome. We need to figure out ways to reduce waste on the manufacturing floor or whatever it is. If that's the desired outcome, reducing waste, that's awesome. The question then is, what is it that's causing the waste? And if we ask the team to, on their own, identify issues causing waste, we'll probably have 20 different things. All 20 are important, but are we going to talk about 20 at once? Probably not. So we introduce a process called weighing the ox based on crowd wisdom that says, look, let's just take a vote. So let's just identify which of these problems, if we solved first, would yield the greatest results. The other problems aren't going to go anywhere, but let's focus on one problem and then agree on what is our criteria? What does a great outcome look like? Not what's a great answer, because most teams just leap right to answers using the checklist in their own head. But if our checklists don't align, we're solving for different
Different
kinds.
problems.
Yeah. So when we can get aligned using this process on what problem are we talking about specifically, what's on the checklist in our head, then and only then are we prepared to come up with answers that have a high impact with very little discussion. We encourage basically no debate among potential answers. It's not a good use of time because you know from your experience, Penny, which answer makes the most sense if we've agreed to what problem we're addressing and what the criteria of great looks like. You can apply your experience and you know, oh, it's number three. I don't think five will work. Seven could be interesting. And go place your votes and then ask
Yeah.
for volunteers to build out the plan and come back.
Yeah. It's incredible how many times people don't realize that they're approaching it from a completely different perspective and solving different problems. So just getting aligned around the problem is huge, getting that common perspective of how you're looking at the problem.
And interestingly enough, if you ask people what the problem is and you ask them what their criteria is, you generated buy in because the way the human psyche works, if your opinion has been truly heard, you are more likely to buy in and commit to whatever solution we come up with because we came up with the solution, as opposed to tell me your ideas and I'll let you know what we're going to do. That's like, okay, well, why did you need me?
Right, absolutely. That'll do more harm than good, right? So it's so important that people feel heard and a part of the process. Also, you mentioned earlier when people are louder than others, that also puts people off when the loud people start talking and they're being listened to, and then everybody else shuts down. So it's so important to create just a simple mechanism to make sure that you're including people in that piece. And it doesn't take very long. Like you said, some people are like, oh, it takes a really long time. There's so many great online tools now too that allow you to do that from a distance. so that you can easily just all sort of put your ideas up, then you categorize them, then they get ranked, and people vote, and it happens in a matter of moments.
Google Slides with stickies are basically free. They are free, and you could do yellow stickies. And the other thing is give people a minute to answer the question on their own before you dive in. So they can anchor their own ideas. When you talked about this whole process of engagement, sometimes we have well-meaning teams and leadership teams that take a survey on engagement, whether they use Gallup survey or some other company, it really doesn't. But then they'll take the survey results and they'll say, okay, so what should we do about this? And they'll come up with a plan, and then they'll roll out a plan, and they'll wait a year and see what the survey results are the next year. And we say, here's a funny thing. The only people who know what the survey results mean are the people who took it, not the leaders who are reading it. And so survey results are the beginning of a conversation called discovery sessions that we outline in the Buy-in Advantage that say, let's go to small teams of people and say, what do you think people were thinking about when they answered this question this way? Whatever question where we get the highest or the lowest rating. And ask them, okay, what would we do to address that situation? And allow them to create the brainstorm and allow people to actually implement solutions. Let's take the burden off, we have all the answers management, and go to, we have all the questions, because leaders ask questions, managers tell people.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, people support what they create. So if they are the ones who are designing the new programs and things like that, they're going to be more supportive. You're going to have your internal cheerleaders that you need to help those things stick, right? Because it's still a change, and change is also, people resist change, even if it's the change that they want sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
That's the paradox of it, is once the change starts to take place, they're like, whoa, this is too fast. I don't want to change, but it's what they wanted. So it is important. I call it a reset rhythm. When you talk about that, what's working, what's not working, and just checking in, is that we have to have a reset rhythm. And once a year, once a quarter, even once a month often is not enough, depending on what it is.
Yeah. And to that point, when we go through this planning cycle, because I know a lot of companies do quarterly planning or annual planning, put a lot of time into it. An important question that's often overlooked is, what did we learn about planning or the scope of objectives from last quarter, last year's cycle? What did we learn before we moved?
It's a great question. Yeah. Being specific about the planning process itself and the scope. That's a great question. And that's a great place for us to wrap it up, since we're out of time for today. Anyway, so Dave, where can people reach you and find out more information about you and your book?
Penny, buyin, buyin book.com, buyinbook.com, or look for me on LinkedIn. Our team and some of our team solutions are at garrisongrowth.com, GARRISON, GROWTH, garrisongrowth.com.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dave.
Penny, thanks for having me, and good luck with the buy-in.
And thank you all. It seems simple, and the concepts are simple, but implementing it is not as easy. But that's, start one step at a time. Start really listening, asking more questions as opposed to giving answers, and you'll find yourself along the path of greater engagement, greater buy-in, and just keep along that path. Thank you for being here. It's time to reset. My name is Penny Zanker, and we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.